Hello and welcome everyone to the Solo Multimedia Podcast, where I give you my unfiltered takes straight off the cuff. And today I'm going to be talking about a new film from Martin Mcdonagh. So for those who don't know, Martin Mcdonagh's a director, and he directed In Bruges, Seven Psychopaths, and Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. If you've seen his films in the past, then you're probably aware that he generally focuses on what you could broadly call dark comedy, I suppose. I think In Bruges really captures that incredibly well. It's got such a unique tone. It's a very uniquely dark film for how comedic it is. And I think Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri also had an element of this, but was definitely a lot more, I guess, commercially viable and ended up doing a lot better as a result. I think In Bruges just has this strange tone that isn't quite as, I guess, it's not as quite a regular viewing experience as something like Three Billboards is. But regardless, I think both films are great. I haven't seen Seven Psychopaths. I've heard it's not as good. I think he's got one other film, but I can't remember what it was. But yeah, basically, both of these films are great. I highly recommend both of them, especially In Bruges, because it just has such a unique tone and setting. But across both films, it's very clear that he has a real knack for writing very kind of complicated characters that have multiple dimensions to them. Drawing out these kind of very morally grey moments, or not even morally grey, I guess, just having characters that definitely have bad and good elements to them, and it's difficult to wholeheartedly embrace or reject any of them, really, which is a really cool element to his films. Now, with this new film, Banshees of Inisherin, what he's done is he's basically, in my opinion, returns to what he had in Bruges, but this film definitely has its own unique character for sure. It's way more low-key and domestic than both of those films. So In Bruges is about two hitmen that have to go to Bruges, and there's, some action sequences, lots of kind of really, really kind of gut-bustingly funny moments and stuff like that. Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri is this kind of... it's kind of similar, and while it is quite a domestic film in terms of what's being covered, the events that happen are still quite large and theatrical and over the top, right? Whereas this film, on the other hand, is basically just about two middle-aged men falling out in a friendship sense. So just to go over the film without giving too much away, basically this is a film about two men that live in essentially a village in Ireland. This is happening during the Irish Civil War as well. So the year that is on a calendar at one point in the film is 1923. And essentially, they've just been friends and go down to the pub every day for however long. You don't really get a sense of how long it's been, but you get the impression that it's something they've done for maybe even decades, like an incredibly long time. And one day, the friend of the main character just turns around and essentially says, I don't want to drink with you anymore, I don't want to see you, I don't want you to talk to me whatsoever. And naturally, the person that is on the other side of this feels incredibly slighted. Is kind of upset, kind of confused as well. There's a lot of that in the film. And over the course of the film, some very strange, arguably unfortunate events kind of happen. But one of the things that's so peculiar to me is, despite the fact that this film ultimately isn't that dramatic, really, it's just a bunch of kind of almost petty little things that wind up rolling into something bigger in the end. Despite that, it is such a dark and bleak movie. I think on Wikipedia it has the genre down as black tragicomedy, and I really can't think of a better descriptor. It's almost weird to me describing this film as a comedy to some extent. It does still have moments where it is absolutely hilarious, without a shadow of a doubt, but the whole tone of the film, all the cinematography, the grey, overcast nature of the place they were shooting, the attitudes of everyone in the town, the way that it all plays out, the subject matters that even touches on, everything in the way it plays out is so, just bleak and depressing and oppressive the entire time. The music choices are also very bleak, and again, it's kind of strange in the same way that In Bruges was, but Bruges kind of... I feel like with that film, because of the setting, and kind of some of the jokes they were playing off of, The soundtrack was almost slightly whimsical at times, and it has a little bit of that, but it's definitely significantly bleaker. I think this is such an interesting film because the director has come such a long way in terms of his directing abilities, especially the cinematography. I think on a technical level, this film is probably a step up from In Bruges. I also felt like Three Billboards was too, but In Bruges just had a much more memorable tone. But this really feels like he's taken everything he learned from Three Billboards and applying it to another very unique, seemingly very personal film to him, because there's moments where it's incredibly thought-provoking. There's lots of clever kind of allegory between different elements of the film that I really appreciate. One thing I will say is, as well, it doesn't feel like a ton happens in this film. It's very much about like the tone and kind of just everything takes as long as it needs to play out. Initially, when I first went into the cinema, I actually thought it felt a little bit slow, maybe because I wasn't entirely sure what to expect. Like I wasn't sure where it was going, or if really it was just going to be like this kind of petty battle between friends throughout the whole film. And because of that, in the first 20 minutes, because I wasn't sure where it was going, I was a little bit like apprehensive about the pace. But I think over the course of the whole film, everything sort of slots into place very nicely. Everything makes sense. The film's incredibly cohesive. Because it's so well made, because the performances are so captivating, because there are moments that are just really goddamn funny. I never really felt bored during the film. That's not quite like accurate. It was a bit of an odd pace to begin with. But ultimately, I think the film justifies its pace, and I think on a second watch, I wouldn't have anywhere near as big an issue with the first 20 minutes. So, with all that being said, I would honestly say this has been one of the best films I've seen in quite a while. Probably one of the best films, well, actually definitely one of the best films of the year, and I'd highly recommend everyone who likes the sound of it and isn't going to be bothered by a potentially a bit of a slow burn. I'd highly recommend you go watch this film. It's pretty masterful in every area you could care to mention. The dialogue is, like I said, ultra captivating. They've all got that thick Irish accent, just adds such a good amount of personality to the film in exactly the same way the city of Bruges did in Bruges. Yeah, I don't know. I think this is arguably his best film. It's the kind of film that after it, I come out really wanting to, really feeling inspired to go out and watch more films, which has always been that's always been kind of a common trait between my favourite media. Like, if I find an album that makes me want to listen to music more, that's typically going to be an album I really, really end up loving, and this film has that quality in spades for sure. Just, there's so much to appreciate in the small details, what it's doing overall. It's incredibly cohesive, like I've already said. In my opinion, all the characters feel well placed. There's lots of just really hilarious moments, despite the tone of the film being incredibly bleak. Yeah, go watch it. Banger of a film. I was incredibly impressed, and Martin Mcdonagh is slowly becoming one of the best modern directors I think we have, to be honest, especially working within this kind of realm of absolutely pitch black comedy. Yeah, I can't recommend it highly enough. I'm sure everyone else has already told you to go watch it if you're in the kind of film circles. But yeah, I just want to be another voice to add to the pile of it's fucking great. Go watch it. Cheers for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you in the future. Peace out, everybody.